Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this video, we are going to talk about lexical relations or semantic relations. Before we proceed talking about this type of relation, we will start to deal with a number of terms, a number of synonyms, or a number of alternatives for the term lexical relations or semantic relations, and then we talk about how semantic relation has been viewed by a number of prominent figures in linguistics. We start from John Lyons, and then we move on to Holiday, and finally we will study lexical relations from a cognitive point of view. We are going to deal with the ideas adopted by Radford in his book Linguistics, Minimalist Introduction. You see that linguists, when they deal with semantic relations, they usually talk about two types or two terms. They talk about connotation and denotation. You remember very well, denotation or reference usually refers to an extra linguistic element. It refers in particular to the entities or state of affairs in the external world which a linguistic expression stands for. While connotation or sense or even meaning is a system of linguistic relationships. And here we talk about sense relations or sometimes semantic relations, which a lexical item contracts with other lexical items. So we have the paradigmatic relationships of synonymy, for example, or antonymy, etc., and the syntagmatic relations of collocation, when a number of lexemes collocate together to refer that they are relevant to a certain idea or meaning. So we have two types of relations. Meaning relation, paradigmatic relations, and syntagmatic relations. Also, linguists talk about association relation, sense association. Sometimes they talk about associative field or associative group. So, associative group or associative field or even sense association simply refers to a set of lexical items which display a specific similarity of form or sense. Now this time we are going to talk about semantic relations as viewed by John Lyons. So John Lyons views about sense first and denotation. You see that for John Lyons, he admits that sense and denotation, these two terms usually taken from philosophy. For him, these terms basically were taken from philosophy other than linguistics. And these terms has been used differently by different philosophers and linguists. As you remember very well, because philosophers are not very much concerned with linguistic issues like, for example, lexical relations, semantic relations, or semantics in general. That is why here linguists later on have elaborated on this type of relations where different ideas, different approaches have been advocated here. According to John Lyons, as you can see here, he states that lexemes are related both to other lexemes in the same language. For instance, cow, you see that here, is related to a particular class of animals. So, for example, it is related to bull or to calf, and at the same time, it is related to entities or properties, situations, relations in the outside world. For instance, cow is related, as we have said, to the external world. Here it is related to a particular class of animals. So that is for John Lyons, a lexeme which is related to other lexemes is related to them by sense. Yani any sort of meaning association, meaning relation for John Lyons is what is simply you see that applied or is operated by virtue of meaning here. Later on, John Lyons admits that sense and denotation are interdependent. Sense and denotation, connotation and denotation are interdependent. Also, for John Lyons, he says that lexemes in English and also in other languages, lexemes in English and in other languages denote natural classes. Sometimes they refer to natural classes, like for example here biological species and physical substances like cow, man, goat, lemon, etc. However, the majority of lexemes or words do not, refer to natural classes. Later on, John Lyons talks about the componential analysis of sense. For him, he thinks that senses of all lexemes are complexes of universal atomic concepts. By the way, if we put it in a technical language or in a technical sense, for John Lyons, sense of some lexemes can be represented in terms of universal sense components, that is, of meaning components. So for this reason, for example, here he says that, as you see clear here, we can use a number of universal semantic components. For instance, we use human, we use female, adult, etc. These are for him universal sense or meaning components. So we can define any lexeme in terms of these components. Other ideas advocated by John Lyons with reference to lexical relations or semantic relations, he says that sense relations found in all languages, these are for him represent syntagmatic relations such as synonymy and antonymy, hyponymy. For example, here antonymy and hyponymy, which are two types of semantic relations, are considered as substitutional relations of sense. So, once again, for John Lyons, the substitutional and syntagmatic relations, both, if we integrate them both together, they give particular lexical fields. We skip to higher level of semantic structure or taxonomy. These are the lexical fields where we have a particular semantic structure, as we will exemplify or illustrate this idea later on from the cognitive point of view by examples taken from Radford. This sense of a lexeme, then finally, for John Lyons, he said that is determined by the network of substitutional and syntagmatic relations that hold between the lexeme in question and its neighbors in the same lexical field or in the taxonomy. Later on, now we are going to talk about lexical relations or semantic relations as viewed by Halliday. So this is Halliday's definition of connotation first and denotations, as we have stated earlier. When we want to talk about lexical relations or semantic relations, we have to refer to these terms. So for Halliday, the emotional, connotation or sense or meaning usually refers to what? To the emotional or personal associations of a word. Any sort of emotional or even personal associations, this implicitly means or refers to connotation, while unitation for him, or the reference as it is called by some linguists, it is the central or core meaning of a word. So for him it is what? It is the denotation here, it is the core, or it is the main central or core meaning of a word. It is a relationship between the word and the reality it refers to. Now we talk about holidays, ideas about word meaning. So the basic or central meaning of a word is determined in a variety of ways. Yani such as, for example, here he talks about the common beliefs about words, which may or may not match the actual usage. يعني in the lexical, he depends sometimes, if we depend on the lexicographical tradition, because meanings usually is understood through the context here. It is, so for him, common beliefs about words plus the lexicographical tradition, two different aspects of meaning should be taken into consideration in order to realize meaning. The common beliefs about words, sometimes it does not match, as we have said, the actual usage, because meaning is determined by context, as we have said. And the other element that should be incorporated within the common beliefs is what is the lexicographical tradition. So we have two contradictory here, by the way, terms. We have unitation or the reference and connotation. So what a word refers to, بمعنى the reference versus the association that the word conjures up in the mind. Unitation for him is what is not self-evident in characterizing meaning, such as sometimes in abstract nouns for holiday, sometimes is not self-evident. It is self-evident and it is not conclusive. It is just argumentative, here, especially in certain types of abstract nouns or in verbs, like for instance believe, dream, think, or even worry, or sometimes with epithets like some adjectives like good, for example, kind, mysterious. So for holiday, the reference or the denotation of the word